Well, we have full room today. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Going to start right away. Organizations today face a key challenge. They are asked to change faster in order to survive. But this is not new for us software people. Actually, agile methodologies were created to solve these kind of problems. But it doesn't seem enough. The pressure over IT keeps growing and growing, or not. I mean, the demand is clear. Be faster. Deliver what we want. And to put the cherry over the cake, make sure to maintain the quality of the software. I mean, seriously? What do these people think? That we are magicians and we are going to create software in 5 minutes? I mean, what do they think we are? It's not that we talk to customers and then we do some magic and then suddenly, pow, software. No, right? And then we just show it to the clients and then they give us feedback and then we say, okay, give us 5 minutes, pow, the changes are made. No, I'm sorry, we don't have this kind of power. We don't. But wait a second. What if I tell you that there is a way? What if I tell you that there is a magic recipe? What if I tell you that I found it? Do you know what it's called? Model-driven development. And it's about programming automation. But, and this is where it comes, in order to make this work successful, you have to model first. Thank you all for coming. My name is Carla Arauco, and I am a Bolivian model-driven development believer. I started liking this topic when I came here to the Netherlands to do a master. And then my interest continues because I work in a company, actually, that implements model-driven development in every one of its software projects. So in my company, I play 2 different roles. In one side, I work with customers. I do the analysis and modeling. And in the other side, I help improving our generator. That's called Carla. By doing these 2 things, I get the best of both worlds. Because when I'm working with the customers, I gain a lot of experience. I learn how the market works. I learn how to do software. And then I go home, my company, and I try to implement all this experience and improve every time the generator to make it better and faster. Because we are aware of the popularity of model-driven development, because this is not a new topic. I'm sure most of you have heard about it, or at least a bit of it. But the problem, we think, is that it's presented a bit too complicated. For example, if I go to the supermarket and I buy bread, and then one day I wake up and say, oh, I wish to buy bread. Oh, sorry, I wish to bake my own bread. And then my only source is this huge list of ingredients of the supermarket that feels very complicated. I won't even try to bake that bread, right? So maybe model-driven development at this time is like that. It's like the bread from the supermarkets. But actually, the recipe is not that complicated. Well, this is a promise that I am making. At the end of the presentation, you tell me if it was difficult or if it was simple. However, I'm here today to try to present this recipe to all of you, the basic recipe. But first, I would like to interact with all of you. Can any of you help me and tell me what does it take to make software, which are the phases? Normal software, which are the phases? What do we do first?
Plan.
Analysis. What do we do next?
Design.
Design. What happens next? Next? Correct. All the answers are correct. Actually, if you can see, this is a very typical software development process in an agile environment. Do you recognize the picture? So exactly what you've done. What you do, first, you do gathering requirements, then you talk to the customers, you do some analysis, then you do the design, then the programmers will build the software, it will be deployed, validated by the customer. If the customer has feedback, the loop starts again. Yeah? And now, what I'm going to present you is the process of software development of MDD. Everybody ready? You see, the phases doesn't change. They're exactly the same. There is analysis, there is gathering of requirements, there is development, there is deployment. So where is the difference? The difference is actually how you would treat the models. In a typical software development process, you will use your models for sure, and if there are people who really wants to use the model at the end, you will use the models in the three first phases: gathering requirements, and then in the analysis, and in the design. And the models will be used especially to communicate with customers and programmers. Now, what happens in MDD actually? The models are not anymore just used to communicate with customers, but also with the computer. The models are not just going to be used in the design phase, but also in the development phase. You might be asking, but what is a model? Well, a model is abstraction of a thing that exists in reality. And there are different types of models, and business people will tell that they recognize many models that are in the business world, the business models, that contains a vocabulary that permits the modeler to define business processes, stakeholders, departments, and then there is the side of the technical models that many technical people might recognize, such as UML, that will describe the software. So, what exactly do you do with this model then? Once you have communicated with the customer and you have constructed your model, you have to use this model also to communicate with the computer. And the idea is that this process and the model touches every part of the software. What you are going to learn in this conference is that knowledge is the heart of software development. And then software experts and domain experts actually work together in order to organize this knowledge. This distillation of knowledge is the process of modeling. And what model-driven development is going to do is going to embed this language and this model in every part of the development, and every step will be done automatically. That we present an agile process is not in purpose, because, as you might say, the main idea of an agile process is to create short continuous deliveries. Then you get the feedback of your customer, and you can improve the software. And then you understand what the customer actually is saying. So imagine if by implementing model-driven development, you can increment the productivity 800 times, because it supposes automatically. then imagine the amount of time that you can talk to your customer. Imagine the amount of time that the number of feedbacks that you get increases. And then the advantage goes even bigger because it helps in maintainability, traceability, and my favorite, because I am an analyst myself, I can see my model evolve into software application, which is for me one of the biggest news, because I'm tired that my model becomes irrelevant and even misleading, and it has to be packed in the, I don't know, in a box and never ever touch again. But you might wonder, how do we do this? For this part, I would like all of you to close your eyes. Close your eyes, please, let's do this. Now what I want you to do is to remember an application that you have built more than once, any application. The application that you automatically know, this is, once I see this, I know how to build it, multiple times. Better if this application was built for the same domain many times. Do you have it in your head? Is someone ready for doing a presentation over it? No, I'm kidding. Actually, once you have this in your head, what I want you to do, so isn't it that if you use a model, and if you're an expert, and the analyst shows you the model, you are like, yeah, I know exactly, when I see this element, I know exactly how I'm going to program it. It's like, oh my God, this is so fast, it's automatic. You experts know how to represent in a program this visual element or not. So actually, model-driven development is about learning how your brain is working. Unconsciously, all of you have an algorithm that makes such conversion, sees something visual, and immediately knows how to program it. So with model-driven development, it's the invitation to take that algorithm out of your heads and teach to the computer how to do it. Sounds very simple. Finally, what I'm going to give you are the 5 steps to take that algorithm out of your head and teach the computer how to do it. Exactly the same thing that you do as an expert. So, of course, the first ingredient of this recipe are the models. So imagine you have already these applications that you have built more than once, and in your head is the model, yeah? What happens next? Immediately you know what you have to do, and immediately you know what you are doing. For software developers, as soon as they see an architecture, you immediately can determine, okay, from this element, I can even create the whole architecture in my head, and you automatically start programming. I'm sure, because I have seen it. So if you have built the application more than once, you for sure have more than one example. And this is where you will start working and trying to figure it out how you can tell the computer, based in all the examples that you have worked on, you can teach the computer how to do it himself. What we are going to do is these examples we're going to start analyzing. Yeah? When you analyze, what you have to find are patterns. But what kind of patterns are we looking for? We are looking for static code, and we are looking for variable code. Which is the static code? Simple. The formula is the code that you copy-paste. That's the static code. The variable code is the code that you are going to type. Simple? No. Once you have discovered your variable code, what you have to do is create a structure that stores the variable code. That's called metadata. The next step is, now that you have the metadata of your code, what you are going to do is create transformation rules, basically take the steps of the algorithm of your head, and write the steps of how to convert the visual element into the program. Those are the transformation rules. Finally, you can create templates for it, create your generator, and test it. Thank you very much. Well, of course, I don't expect that all of you have get all these in once. So what I would love is to give you an example of how to implement these 5 steps. For software experts, I have to apologize. For people who is not software, I think I tried to find an example that might feel very simple for expert softwares. But I need to think about in all the audience. So my warning is that the example that we are going to use doesn't have anything to do with the capability of model-driven development, but it is an example that lets me show you in simple words what I was trying to say with my 5 steps. Okay? So let's pretend that all of us have worked together for many years. I know all of you. And I work with all of you. Yeah? And today we got a task. We all have to create a conference administration application. Okay? Can you raise your hand who can recognize this sort of architecture? Hi, I don't see it. Thank you. Well, as many as you can recognize, this architecture is a web-based, typical 3-tier layer client, server, databases. So what the idea is that we are able to register participants, presentations, locations, speakers, and that our server layer stores the data in our database. Yeah? This is the task. Okay. So this is how it's supposed to look like. Very simple. What do we do first? Okay. So the day that we interview our domain expert, he told us that in order to have a successful subscription, our participants must register his first and his last name. Okay, but isn't it that we have done this many times? Isn't it that this is a very common application? Yeah, right. Okay, but then I don't want to do this manually anymore. I want to implement model-driven development. I am not going to do this work 100 times. I'm sorry. I am smart enough to do something different every time. So that's what we are going to do. We are going to try to generate the first layer, the user layer. Okay. So remember the second step? Know what you are doing. So someone just pick up the example, and you can see this is a very normal HTML form. You have the example. And immediately, again, I want, if you can already foresee your own applications, it can be easily a web application like this, or the applications that you have in your head that you have done multiple times. So I hope that you can already visualize similar steps. So what do? We start analyzing the example. What does it mean? What kind of analysis should we do? We start looking for patterns. We start looking for code that is static and code that is variable. So when we already identify which code is the static, which code is the variable, we are able to extract the variables and then store it in a metadata. Can you recognize? Actually, this is a metadata that says that an application has multiple forms, and that the form has a save button, and that the form has a data entry controls. Can you see the metadata of this language? Easy. In your application, it might be very complicated. I don't know what's in your head right now, but this is easy. And of course, I just need to warn, this is extremely oversimplified version, so I hope I don't get questions over it later, but okay. What happens next? Actually, what you have defined is the metadata of the target language. You have already learned how to program it, and you have already know that this needs to be populated via conversion. But you don't do this population manual. That's when, now, what you have to do is to also look for the metadata of your conceptual model. You already have learned how to construct. There is also theory about metadata of your target language. And once you have identified the metadata of both, and you have thought, now this is the time when you just don't see anymore the elements and convert it into a program, you have to figure it out how to make a conversion from the source language to the target language. And you do it by implementing the transformation rules. Once you have done this conversion, you have found the algorithm for your computer to understand how to generate code from your conceptual models. Any conceptual model, any model that you know. It can be technical, it can be business, it can be textual, it can be graphical, it can be one that you invented, it can be any model. The only thing that you need to learn is that you need a metadata of the model that you have in your head. Finally, once we have the conversion, we are able to construct our templates. And basically, what you program is not anymore a normal form, but what you program is the template that from now on is going to generate the HTML code. The last step is to test. You might be wondering, okay, but why would I do so much complicated work if at the end it's a simple form? I could take 5 minutes to do this form. And that's when I say, when I'm using this example, I'm not trying to demonstrate the capability of model-driven development. You know how complex the applications that you work on are. Model-driven development can be used and models can be taken advantage with model-driven development. And the advantages are endless. The only limit is your creativity, actually. So to finish, next time you generate your service layer, you generate your database layer, and you have done the generation for the whole web application. So next time when someone asks you, can you do a web application? I'm not going to do that. Let's press the button. The generator will do. I'm going to talk, and I'm going to concentrate in more complex stuff, in the stuff that are more important. Well, in my company, we have implemented these steps many times, because we believe that IT activities can be carried out automatically, better and faster by computers. And currently it's happening. It's happening in different industries. Software development, it is this sort of industry. And all of you are in business. All of you are experts. One of the characteristics of model-driven development, and this is where I want us to concentrate. Model-driven development is a natural to domain-driven design. Why? Because imagine, it guarantees that the knowledge of domain experts reach from the mind of a domain expert, through the software experts, through the software, through the end user. So, one of my invitations, maybe you could be the next one. Of course, we are not asking you, or we are not pretending that you immediately start generating your complicated applications. Oh my God, no, that will cost you a lot. But if you already have pieces of code that you think that you could generate, and you already work with formal models, you could start iteratively. Let's start with a piece of code, and the next one, let's do it manually. Let's create an environment that can talk to each other. So, and then next time you learn and you do it better, you can increment your generator. So do it iteratively, and make sure that the code that you are generating actually is readable and changeable for human programmers. Finally, if all of you are interested, I would love to invite you to explore the model-driven development world, because this topic is not new. This topic has been here for a while. And while the people who use it, maybe it's not too many, it's very smart. It's taking advantage of automating programming. So when you go to the internet, you can search for these terms, and I hope they don't feel as scary as they could feel. And to finish, what I wish for all of you is that when your customers demand software fast and high quality, you don't say, I'm sorry, I don't have that power anymore. But instead you say, sure, give me 5 minutes. I will use some magic. Thank you very much.
Time for Q&A. We have a lot of time, actually. You were really fast.
Yes, sorry.
Anyone?
So you talked a lot about the recipe, which is very general.
Yes.
Can you give some hints to concrete tools that can help to build a model-driven development?
Yes. Currently, formal tools, the Java world that implements model-driven development, EMF. Yes. And sorry, I have to invite my my expert here also for that question.
Hello, I'm Kaiton Buitenrijk. I'm the founder of Gorilla IT, one of the founders. You asked for a tool specifically for model-driven. If you look at the Eclipse framework, there's this EMF building blocks. There's Xtext. There's everything that you can use to build textual parsers. Like if you invent your own language for to talk to the business and you want to parse it in text, then use Xtext or something else. There are also other tools like JetBrains MPS. There you can create other editors. Also are really suitable for making your own language or diagrams, for expressing what you really want. To really be able to communicate on a business level and then transform it automatically to working text or working code.
Yes.
And of course, you can also start low level. If you, we saw some examples like make your own meta model. In this presentation, we showed you don't need to have specialized tools, but you can also just store your own meta model in something like a JSON or XML file, if that's something that the programmers are feeling really comfortable with, then you don't really need to start using difficult model-driven tools. So I advise you first just try to find your own patterns. Like everyone knows, we showed. This is like the millionth times that I created a stupid CRUD form, create, read, update, and delete form. For a typical administration application, maybe just model it, find your own data store in XML, JSON, and just use simple templating classes that you can find everywhere. If you're a programmer, maybe you can use string templating or other technologies. You don't need to really immediately start with the model-driven toolset.
Thank you, Kaiton.
Thank you.
It strikes me as very similar to, sorry for my voice.
Yes.
It strikes me as very similar to hypermedia forms. And there are languages like Siren out there to help you do that. And you don't need the server-side component. So you can do this with a a lot less effort than you're laying out.
Yeah, for sure. Yes.
Siren.
Siren. I have actually a question.
Yes, sure.
What I haven't seen is basically where is your domain model? I saw a model for front end, which can be performing some basic validations, but where are domain rules?
Yeah, actually, when I start using the model-driven example, I start with a very simple domain that is that is actually the conceptual model. Oh, yeah. This is a conceptual model. It is we use a fact-based modeling language where we define the domain in these sort of diagrams. That's ORM, object role modeling. But you can also use business processes and business rules. This is just for the sake of the example. But yes, there are many other models that lets you define the organization enterprise.
Okay.
Yes.
What do you think that there were a lot of attempts to make applications more generic and move stuff to the configurable parts, and some of us know Spring, and in 5 years' time you end up with more XML code or metadata than actual code, and every time you need to rebuild something, you start fixing your metadata and you start fixing your generator. So instead of doing a small bug fix, you actually need to regenerate the whole thing. So isn't that a risk of getting into that deep, that you depend on your generator, you can't even do anything without using generator? This is
the old model-driven school. We work in a consultancy, so we don't recommend let's generate everything and let's try to generalize everything. Actually, the context, when you work with businesses and customers, they will always demand flexibility. What you have to create is an environment that lets you generalize what it can be generalized, that it lets you generate what it can be generated, and then the other could you do it manually. So we don't highly recommend let's generate, because it's exactly why model-driven development is so not very popular. So the recommendation is not at all generate everything and just use a generator that's where you start becoming inflexible.
I just started to think, for example, we have a service layer and we have 3 layers, and what if we do tomorrow we approach the limits of the application performances, we want to scale it, and we decide, let's do microservices, okay, or let's do this particular subdomain, persisted using event sourcing, and then we start working on generators to support all the scenarios.
Yes, but right now you are just focusing on the technical part. When you have your conceptual model and you have your knowledge, and you created a model-driven architecture, you don't need to do this work 3 times. You just need to learn the next time you are going to create a new application. You just need to learn how it's going to be how it's going to be converted to a new technology, to a new language. So basically, what you are doing is a conversion between languages. This will always be your knowledge. This will always be the domain expert knowledge, and the conversions will not depend on the technology. So there will be a new technology in the future, and that's where it's more like converting, not the advantages is that you just have one source of knowledge.
Just as a feedback, I would really love to see more complicated model than this.
Yes, for sure. It's more for reaching all kinds of audiences. And this was the basic recipe. Yeah, it's more complicated than that.
Question?
Okay. How do you maintain the generators when you have added requirements to the generator and different projects?
I think this is in the sense of technical. How does you can create a continuous delivery with the?
Yes.
Yes. Well, Gaetan can answer, I think. Sorry.
Yeah. You ask how do we use this? Our generator is like a tool set, and that given a certain model, it will generate just source code, like a normal program will do. So, how to? And your question is how to? I think how to cope with changes in while your generator has maybe new possibilities. You don't want old applications to suddenly have new possibilities because that will freak people out. And you will also want to make sure that your old models are compatible with your new models. I think. Yeah. So what we do is when we make a project and we deliver it, like we describe to the customer, we are going to deliver your projects with this architecture, with this C# coding standard, and it's also built with a certain version of our generator. So the project that we deliver is also always together, like it's the source code, but we also have it versioned together with a certain version of the generator. If we build the generator itself is of course also an IT project. So we have projects that only are for just testing the generator. So for making a new version of the generator, we make sure that the old versions are always being tested with the new versions. Yeah, so that's how we, by automatically testing the generator and with test projects, we really can see that every new possibility will also work with the existing old models. So, is that the answer? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Great.
All right. I also, sorry, again a question for me. Do you have you measured time? Are you actually not spending more time on maintaining a generator versus writing everything again? Because every time you write the application, you actually write it faster, better, and kind of in the mode of continuous improvement. And you can use stuff like reusable components. And so for me, the question is, is it paying off?
Yeah, for sure. That's why we are maintaining the generator.
Okay.
And I personally, when I go and work with customers, and I am able to show them in 5 minutes what the outcome is, and then they can, they are surprised how fast we can do the delivery, and then we start. So the discussion actually with the customer is, okay, I start creating the domain and the conceptual model, and then I can show it to the customer almost immediately. Of course, they get surprised, and then they somehow they visualize their own requirements so fast that then it becomes more natural. The customer becomes part of the team, and actually, for us, I have paid, and we keep making the generator smarter and smarter. We are consultants, so we go learning. It's not that we can cover with the generator every project, but as soon as we can do it one time, and then we can recognize the pattern, and we can make our generator smarter, we do it. So next time, the generator becomes bigger and bigger. And we can, of course, we cannot cover all the most complex domains, but that being a consultant, that let us learn a lot.
All right, anymore. Sorry, first on the back.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Michael Borisov. I have a question. So as I understand, you have running this generator for quite some time already with the multiple successful projects.
Yes.
Have you ever considered maybe to productize it, to make it as a product so that other developers also can benefit from it?
Well, I might say that there are products in the market that says that they do model-driven development. And those kind of products, because they go so fast to the market, make us look a bit inflexible. Us, as a strategy we use the generator as part of the team. Actually, our generator is one more of the team, because our strategy is to try to be the best consultant company in software development. But if we would love to sell it as a project, then as a product, it's a different. We have to think of how to really make sure that developers can use it. And normally, the current products are specifically pointing at the business people who doesn't know how to program. So you can model it, and automatically you can throw code. But we are software developers, so we are more ambitious than that. We know that for doing some model-driven development, you also require some skills. Yes, it will be very nice that it comes as a product, but we would like better is to teach. And if you want to take a look at how we do it, of course, you are invited anytime.
There were 2 questions. You first. Sorry, I come to you.
Hello. Mine is more of an anecdote than a question. So
Sure.
about a decade ago,
Yes.
I was working with the Formula One team,
Yeah.
and they had a big project that they wanted doing. They had a big consultancy company come in,
Yes.
and the consultancy they used this kind of approach.
Yeah.
And so the F1 team said, "This is the system that we want to replace. Here you go, 40 screens. Can you give us a quote?" And of course, they just went with what they saw on the screen. And they had no idea of how complex everything was behind the scenes.
Yes.
So when they gave the quote, the enterprise architect was so keen to get it signed off because he realized that they were going to, basically get a big system delivered at a tenth of the cost because they didn't realize. So really, this is, for you, please don't fall into that trap.
No. Once we are in the model-driven development world, we can, you have to be smart and learn from these experiences. And as soon as the technology goes evolving, you also have better ways to do it. That's 15 years ago, and I have heard many anecdotes about model-driven development, and even I've been almost attacked. Why do we do model-driven development if it was so inflexible? And that's when you start learning from the mistakes. You don't do it, and you try to take as much as advantage of this tool. It's automating. So automating already is an advantage in this time. Why not automating software development, but also with a bit of criteria, right? Yes.
First of all, thumbs up for the presentation. I really liked it.
Thank you.
The other thing I was wondering about, how do domain experts interact with the model itself
Yes.
in practice? And can the domain expert, for example, change the model, or is it just looking at it, or?
Well, actually the modeling techniques that we are trying to look for are techniques that also the domain expert can immediately feel that is predictable. When we use fact-based modeling, we use a modeling that is very near to natural language. So basically, our models will look like a sentence, but they are still objects and relations. So we try to search for models that exist in the market that are understood by business, are understood by programmers, and those are the models that we are going to try to use as much in domain. And of course, in our experience, we also know that there are many models, that there are no models that could represent what we would like to represent. And then we start thinking of how can we extend the domain in order to satisfy our necessities.
All right, any more questions? Then we're done. It's lunchtime now. So,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you very much.